Hi, I'm Dr. ZaLonya Allen with the National Entrepreneurs Association, and welcome to the NEA Webinar Series presented by the National Entrepreneurs Association. And I'm here today again with another exciting guest. Her name is Dr. Janice Cardwell, and I'll read her bio and then we'll get started. Dr. Cardwell is former Vice President, Campus Director for the University of Phoenix, Detroit, and a strong advocate for entrepreneurs. She has 30 years experience in adult learning and higher education. Dr. Jan is also an entrepreneur, as CEO and founder of Conceivers LLC. Her firm provides empowerment life coaching, executive coaching, and dissertation coaching services. She brings a wealth of experience to the organization as our chair, having held numerous board positions for a variety of nonprofits. Dr. Cardwell earned her doctorate of philosophy in education from Capella University. Welcome. How are you today?
I'm doing excellent. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for joining me, and I'm just going to jump right in. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in leadership and became a leadership expert?
So that's a really good question to ask someone like me. I'm going to just, first of all, put it out there. I'm 73 years old. So I became, my first leadership position was when I was 21 years old. And I was leading a group. I worked in a computer operations for AT&T, which was Michigan Bell at that time. So I'll tell you how old I am. And I was promoted to be the leader of the computer. My title was actually Computer Operations Supervisor. 21 years old, operating a mainframe computer. And I think I had about 10 employees at that time. So I usually say 30 years so that I don't date myself on a resume or 30 plus. I've kind of pushed that up to like 40 plus years now because, you can't keep saying 30 and you look like 73. So my point is, it's been a long time. I've had leadership positions on every job I've ever had in my life. I've become a leader, every single one.
Wow. And so, what that makes me think of is that old adage, you're born a leader or you're not. So, what are your feelings on that? Do you think people are born leaders, or is that a skill that you can develop?
Okay, so here's what I believe in anything that can be born. I believe the only thing that we are born with is our gender, our ethnicity, and our curiosity. I believe we're born with those things. But everything else, I believe that we acquire in life as and it's cultivated by our cultural, our life experiences, our circumstances, and our experiences. So let me give you an example of what I mean by this. A young woman is not born to be a leader of a family. I mean, really, we don't even know if we're going to have children when we're born, do we? However, if her circumstance forces her to be a single mother, head of household, that circumstance now becomes the experience of her life, and she has to cultivate her leadership competencies. And I know that's kind of like a roundabout answer to that question, but as my strong belief, when I'm asked that question about is leadership something you're born with?
Okay, well, then that should give hope to a lot of people who feel like I'm not a leader. So, we're here today to specifically talk about leadership with regard to entrepreneurs. So, can you tell us why it's important for entrepreneurs to have leadership skills?
So, the wisest, okay, I'm going to share a quote with you that I like. It's called The Wisest of Insights That Can Be Gained by Any Man or Woman is the realization that our world is not so much what it is, but what we choose it to be. So here's why it's important for entrepreneurs to be leaders. You have to hold your own hand. When you put that shingle up that or put that sign up, whether you do it physically in a brick and mortar or you do it virtually on the internet, or however you put that sign up that says, I am an entrepreneur. I have a business, I have a product, I want to sell you something, then you've decided that you are the front, you are the leader, you're the one that's going to make that influence on others. And so, and that's why I say, um, you have to hold your own hand crossing the street. You are your own sage, you are your own guide, and your personality is the business.
All right. So, what would you recommend for someone who they have a great idea or they're really good at something and they want to start a business, but unlike you, they've never been in a leadership position. They've always taken direction from others. What should they do then to develop that skill set?
So you want to sharpen your own saw. And that's not my term, it's the term of Stephen Covey. And you want to sharpen that saw with training and development of your leadership skills. Now, I've worked, when I always put in my bio that I've worked across several industries, the one thing that's common across all industries, no matter what kind of leader role you're in, they train their leaders continuously. So as an entrepreneur, take that same message from corporate America into your uh, entrepreneur business, which means you've got to constantly train yourself, expose yourself with your associations with other people who are both entrepreneurs and leaders, because you can be an entrepreneur, but not a leader until you really start putting yourself out there as a leadership with your leadership competencies. And so training, continuous training. And that's why I really, really respect the fact that you have your boot camp and then you have additional activities for entrepreneurs to learn about leadership. And that's important.
Absolutely. You're really on point there because I remember working in corporate and we were constantly training. They were bringing in speakers to train us, or they would just put us in teams
Yeah,
and give us a problem to solve, which would help us develop those skills.
exactly.
So I'm sure you know, being a leadership expert, that there are a number of different leadership styles. So, can you talk a little bit about some of the more popular styles and which ones you think are most effective for entrepreneurship? Is there one, or should it be a combination of styles?
So that's a really good question. And I've asked it often whenever I'm interviewing or speaking with some. I like to, first of all, explain I'm not an advocate of defining one leadership style. My experience in life is that leadership is situational, and that will dictate the style that you draw on. For example, you say you can be good, you open a business, you want to be an entrepreneur. So automatically you are naturally a transformative leader. You are a person that says, you hung up your sign, you say, I'm open for business. My goal is to transform your life with my product or service, with the use of my product or service, whatever I'm doing. So transformational leader is the first style I always think of when it comes to entrepreneurship. But then once you gain clients or customers, your leadership style may transform or change based on the situation that you're working on. So then you may become a servant leader. And so those two are my primary: transformational and servant. And then all other leadership styles fall behind that. But to me, those are the two that guide my life most, is because once you become my client, those who teach skills on customer service skills, you give your client more than ask for. So you have to take on that servant persona as a giver. I'm going to give you what I can give you as a servant because you are my customer or my client. But your life will be transformed by my product or my service.
Yes, and that's great that you say you're not a proponent of just one style, because I agree, especially in entrepreneurship and owning a small business, so many aspects of your personality are going to be required of you to be successful. So you may have a team that you're working with, and you're required to have more of an authoritative leadership style and give more direction, where there will be times when you can offer more autonomy because people have a strong developed skill set that doesn't really require much direction or management.
The other thing you have to do as an entrepreneur, you got to read the room. You just can't be, you come in and you think everything's going to be one way. All of a sudden it flips into something else. So you've got to read the room. What's really going on? What style of leader do I need to be for this situation? It could be an emergency. And immediately you got to be the kind of leader that's going to take charge of the situation. Or it could be where someone is having a family issue. Yeah, so now you've got to be a caring leader. You've got to come in with some caring. So, which is why I don't totally agree that one leadership style should be what defines you as an entrepreneur. I believe in self-leadership, but self-leadership is really comes with understanding concepts for self-leadership. And then any other styles fall under those situations.
Okay, so that brings me to leadership traits. So, what is the number one trait that you think a leader should have, or maybe the top three traits? Like, I know communication skills is definitely one, but if you could elaborate on why having strong communication skills would be important, and then what other skills are important for anyone watching that may want to develop those skills.
Okay, so I don't talk about entrepreneurship in terms of the specific skills because I believe that skills can be developed. But I talk about entrepreneur sense and what can you empower. And we have to empower what I call, and which I define, and I'm not the only one, psychologists call it your self-concept. So let me just explain what I mean by that. I believe in self-leadership. Self-leadership, the foundation of self-leadership are the self-concepts of our life. The self-concepts are your self-efficacy. What do you believe? Can you, as an entrepreneur, do you believe in your product? So, and that's why you do vision. That's why vision boarding and vision things are so important. Put visuals about your business because you've got to ingrain that belief in what you're doing. And that is really your guide. That's your sage, your belief system, which could be your spiritual system, your visionary system. But in addition to that, your self-regulation. So now let's talk about it from a skill concept. Are you able to regulate your clock and your calendar? Your clock and your calendar, you control how your day goes, you control the activities in your day, you control everything about your life, which requires emotional intelligence. You've got to be emotionally intelligent to understand that if you're going to be successful as an entrepreneur, you've got to schedule your life around your business, not just your business life, but your family life. Your work-life balance has to be scheduled. And so you don't come in with blindsiding everyone. I'm just going to do this. What you do is regulate it. The other thing you have to be as an entrepreneur, and all of these will develop the skills of communication, the skills of activity. But the other thing you got to have is that self-determination. And the self-determination is if I fall off this wall, can I get myself back up? And so when I talk about entrepreneurship, I talk about it in terms of how do we empower ourselves to continue to grow our business. Self-discipline is really one of the most important things as an entrepreneur because you got to have when I speak and train on this, I really emphasize, do you understand the power of no? Because if we can't say yes to the things that are good for our business and no to the things that are not good for our business, then the business doesn't grow. You have to have that discipline of self. And then the last thing I always talk about is self-care. Are you taking care of yourself? I just went through a major illness that pulled me out of I canceled conferences, I canceled speaking things, I canceled a lot of things in life because my health went down. And I was shocked. I thought I was a pretty good person taking care of myself, but things can jump on you. So self-care has to be, even though it might be the last thing I talk about when it comes to entrepreneurship, it is really the thing that wraps around your belief that you can do it, your self-regulation, your self-determination, your self-discipline. All of this is engaging your self-care. So yeah, communication skills are extremely important. You have to have grit, you have to have courage, you have to have all those things, but they all fall into those concepts of self.
All right. Well, you've said a lot, but I want to go back to emotional intelligence. So that's a term that I hear from time to time, but for people who may not be familiar, what is emotional intelligence and how does that impact leadership?
So emotional intelligence really probably is one of the most important things we have to have. It falls under the self-concept of self-regulation. And what it means is it's the ability for us to manage how we respond to things in life. Emotionally, the biggest fault that we have as human beings is that we do get emotional about situations and circumstances. And you can, in a moment, in a second, you might take years to grow a business. And we see this on the internet all the time. But one bad statement on the internet, because you at that time you're so charged up, you're so emotional, so you take your fingers to the keyboard and I want to type something bad about somebody. That's not emotional intelligence because you can destroy your business or your reputation in a second by not being able to control how you respond to people, situation, circumstances. Have, um, if you can't take feedback, I'm actually writing an article for a magazine. And my first draft I sent to the person who invited me. I'm just the keynote article in the magazine. And I said, I'm okay with feedback. There are a lot of people that can't take feedback. They see feedback as criticism. Emotional intelligence is you having the consciousness and the understanding that give me some feedback. That's why every business now gets reviews. We are in a reviewer world. And as an entrepreneur, we probably need to have reviews of every activity that we engage with. And we have to have the emotional intelligence to receive that review because right now, this world we live in is tough. People are going to tell you how they feel about you, and you got to have the emotional intelligence to deal with it.
Yes, and a lot of entrepreneurs will say that they can take feedback or invite feedback, and then when you give it to them, they get upset. So, are there strategies or techniques that a person who is very emotional and gets angry or upset, things that they can do in the moment to put those emotions in check?
Well, most of the training on leadership says, take a pause, count to five. Don't immediately react. Internally do some kind of self-assessment. What am I going through right now? That's what emotional intelligence is stopping and doing a self-analysis of the situation. And sometimes it's only a minute that you have it, but you have to pause before responding. And then find a way to make that response a compliment to the other person. Thank you for the feedback. Okay, that puts words out your mouth, right? Diffuses the situation and gives you a moment to think inside your head while you're saying, hey, thank you for the feedback. I never looked at it like that. You know what? I'm glad you gave me that perspective. Compliment the giver.
Yeah, that's a technique that I use. I was at a meeting one day and someone came up to me and he said, "Boy, you look tired today."
Yeah,
And I'm like, "Well, thank you for sharing." But I'm like, who does that?
exactly. And right, thank you for sharing. I mean, because immediately as a woman, the first thing we want to do is, oh my God, am I looking that bad today? We want to just go run for a mirror. But yeah, it's first of all, you got to figure maybe he's telling you that because he cares enough about you to know that you probably had a busy day. You got to look at it as, maybe feedback is good. Sometimes feedback is good, and sometimes feedback's not good. So you just have to know how to deal with it.
Yes. So let's talk about work-life balance because so many entrepreneurs put in long hours. Why is work-life balance important? And how do you incorporate that in a busy schedule as a leader?
So I speak about work-life balance from the context of empowering your self-regulation of your life because and so we have to do that, work-life balance. Immediately the first thing that comes to mind is family, maybe other responsibilities, because a lot of entrepreneurs either have a job or have another job, or they teach or they do something to supplement the income of entrepreneurs, especially in the beginning. So work-life balance is creating schedules, and not only creating schedules, job tasks based on your business and your family needs. And the primary goal for the entrepreneur is to demonstrate emotional intelligence about your time, your schedules, your goals, activities, and your management of self.
Okay. And I think work-life balance is important too, because when you take that time, like you talked about earlier, for self-care,
Yep,
that's going to rejuvenate you and increase the quality of your work. Because when you're tired and you are out of balance, your work suffers, and then people start to notice.
absolutely. And it's not just that, it's our mental health that suffers also. So and as an entrepreneur, when I talk about reading the room, when you read the room of life right now, we've got generational changes going on. We've got younger people who are now able to purchase your product or your service, or who are starting their own businesses. And so there's some cultural, gender, and age dynamics that are going on right now in the world. And so we've got to be able to adapt and adjust. And work-life balance requires that. If you have children, you've got to adjust the children's schedules. You've got to adjust everything to be successful. Everything has to be regulated in your life. I use a calendar. I put on my calendar every morning that I need to do some exercise to remind me exercise must be part of my life. I got to walk 30 minutes a day. I have to.
Yeah. Great advice. So we're living in some uncertain times right now. A lot is happening, and at times it's overwhelming. Just, the day to day, but then within an organization, things are happening daily. So my question is, what advice can you give entrepreneurial leaders in a crisis? Something goes wrong in the business, and you're not only leading yourself, but you're leading the team. What are some things that they can do to just be really more effective in that situation?
So the first thing that comes to my mind is empowerment. Empower the team. Bring the team in. Bring your employees in. Bring everybody in. Okay, here's the problem. And I have a what I call a problem paper. You know, I guess it's because I spent so many years in organizations to know that there's always an operations manual. So for an entrepreneur, you call that operations manual your problem playbook. No matter what the situation, you think about it in advance on how you could respond to it. Because then when it comes up as an emergency or something like it as an emergency, you've already done the mental work of how you're going to respond to a challenge. Even if you don't use it for 10 or 20 years, you've done the mental brain is that strong that you've done the mental work for recall. So in a crisis or in an emergency situation, the more you spend time developing self and the more you spend that time thinking about what potential problems could occur in advance. So when they do occur, you're better equipped to deal with them. And I've always found that to work for me. And that's why businesses do so much training. They train you on crisis, they train you on emergency, they train you on everything. So why wouldn't an entrepreneur prepare themselves with training themselves?
Yeah, and one of my favorite quotes is your external world is just a representation of your internal world.
Exactly.
So what you're saying to me is you've got to develop those habits so that when something goes wrong, you're automatically doing those things that you've programmed in through your training.
Correct. Like it's, we learn how to ride a bike. You may not ride a bike for 20 years, but then one day somebody says ride a bike. And you get on it, and automatically you might be shaky at first, but you know how to ride a bike. And that's the point I'm making with entrepreneurship. Leadership is knowing the way. John Maxwell says leadership is knowing, going the way, showing the way, and going the way. Knowing the way, showing the way, going the way. Which means that we've got to have some internal preparation to be able to know the way. And then we don't know all circumstances that have come up as an entrepreneur, but we can think about the possible things that could come up and how we're going to handle it.
Absolutely. So I want to start to wrap things up here by talking about mentorship and coaching. In your career, did you have a mentor in any of your jobs that help you develop your leadership skills?
Absolutely, I did. I can think back on all the jobs that I've had that every single job I had, there was someone, you kind of walk into a room and there's one person that's almost like a light. And it's almost like there's a light shining on this person, not a real light, but something about them, their persona, their personality. And so some of my best mentors have been the leader. Um, Part of what I teach is one of my situational leadership classes. I teach about do you hire someone smarter than you? Would you hire
Mm.
someone smarter than you? So if you're an entrepreneur and you're in business, why wouldn't you look for employees that are smarter than you, that bring in that skill set that you need? My leadership mentors were always the kind of people who hired people for their skills, not necessarily for the background. They hired them for the light they saw in you, what they saw your potential to be. And
Now,
those are the people I gravitate to.
some people won't do that though, Dr. Jan. They
Most
won't
people
hire
won't do it.
someone
Most
who's
people won't do it.
smarter because they're threatened by it.
Exactly. Most people won't do it. Most people won't, but I do. I hire people. I look for people who are smarter than me. As vice president of the university, I hired young, and I will say primarily African American women who were single mothers primarily. And what I found is and that's another story that I talk about, is how leadership skills are acquired as a head of a household. The missing leader in the whole world is this African American woman who's had to hone her leadership skills because of circumstance and experience of life. So when I hired women and I began to look at it, this was started making me really look at leadership, looking at their profile, looking at their background. They had to solve problems all the time at home. So when it came to the job, and there's a problem solving need on the job, these are the ones who are the first to have, oh, I have an idea. Oh, I have an idea, because they are problem solvers. So I hire people smarter than me.
That's great. So I want to wrap with this. Do you have a specific story or a situation that you really had to demonstrate your leadership skills? I can think of one. We've known each other for years, and I remember having to we used to meet on the campus there where you were the director, and you couldn't come to a meeting because you had to let people go, which is always very challenging. And I just thought, wow, you're such a strong person and a strong leader because having to do something like that is just super challenging, but you were so composed. So that's one example that I recall. But do you have a story that you can share where you really had to pull on those leadership skills and what got you through?
Uh, you know what? I probably got about 100 stories, but here's one that relates to entrepreneurship. I had a young entrepreneur wrote a book. We used to do these things on the campus. The pitch contest on the campus, and we'd have people come in and they'd pitch their business or their idea. So I had one young lady, you know her, Brandy, and she pitched a book she had written on entrepreneurship. And then Brandy approached me after, because she won that contest that day. And she came to me, she said, Dr. Cardwell, I'd like to offer an entrepreneur training program on the campus. So I was met with opposition from my leadership team. One person took the book and said, well, she's got so many errors in the book. I said, okay, well, errors can be fixed. Then the other person said, well, why would we let her do that? This is entrepreneur. She's just, she's finding reasons not to give her opportunity. And
Mm.
so my leadership challenge was, do I take the advice from my leader? It was several of them. Or do I go with my gut and see the potential that she has? Anyway, I went with my gut to see the potential that she brought in. And as she developed her program, it was absolutely amazing to see how many people actually, she ended up with over like 30, 40 people enrolled in her program based on her book. So when I think about people who would be smarter than me in a room, Randy's one of them. I think about it because I was so impressed with what she was able to do with her program.
Yeah, that's a great story. I think leaders have to be able to recognize the talent in others, especially when that talent is raw. And I can recall on one of my jobs at a company where my supervisor just really took a liking to me and helped me develop my skills to a point I was like, what is wrong with this lady? Because I've never had anybody care that much besides my mother.
Right.
So when you can find that in a leader, that's just awesome.
And look at you today, based on that experience where someone saw something in you, someone saw your light and they wanted to make it brighter. And that's all I say when I look for people. When I say people who are smarter than me, I look for people who have a light that I could make brighter. And I think that's part of leadership. What can you give? Because you're not always taking, you're asking people to donate their life. You're asking clients and customers to follow you and to use your product or your service, which means you're asking them to donate their life to you. So, you've got to be able to give back to people.
Yeah, and that's a great way to close. Give back. And also, I think a key theme that I heard throughout our conversation is the importance of developing yourself and
Yes,
developing your skills. And that's automatically going to develop those leadership skills.
absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me today, Dr. Janice Cardwell. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time on the NEA Wednesday webinar.
Thank you for having me. Enjoy. Bye bye.